Berlin, 1933. A winter morning, shrouded in fog, and inside an abandoned government facility on the outskirts of the city, a wooden crate is pried open for the first time in nearly a century. Inside, dozens of photographs, brittle and yellowed, each stamped with an insignia the world hasn't seen since before the Second World War. Faces stare from the paper, blurred, elongated, distorted human, yet not. Some are children, some are something else entirely. The archivists who discovered them describe one thing in common among all the photos: no eyes. Every subject's eyes had been scratched out, either on the negative or by hand with a blade. When investigators traced the markings on the back of one photograph, they found coordinates leading to a facility erased from all official maps after 1939. At first glance, the photos looked like remnants of Nazi medical experiments, but as historians dug deeper, the dates didn't match. These photos were taken 3 years before any known medical research programs began by a group that officially didn't exist. And that's where our story begins, with images no one was ever meant to see, and a secret society that blurred the line between science, mysticism, and human experimentation long before the world knew its name. Why were these photos hidden for nearly 100 years? And what truth did they capture that terrified even those who created them? The year is 1930. Germany is fractured caught between the fading glow of the Weimar Republic and the dark horizon of authoritarianism. The Great Depression has begun to crush Europe, and underground movements, political, religious, and scientific, begin to thrive in the chaos. Among them, one organization operated without name or nationality: Die Obsidian Gesellschaft, or the Obsidian Society. Very few records of its existence survive today. What we know comes from fragments, intercepted letters, old bank transfers, and that one wooden crate of photographs uncovered in 2007 beneath the ruins of a Berlin archive. The society claimed to pursue the next stage of human consciousness. But beneath that idealism lay something far more disturbing. Their members included surgeons, neurologists, and occult scholars, men and women, who believed that consciousness itself could be extracted, measured, and transferred. At the center of it all was Dr. Friedrich Brandt, a neurobiologist once celebrated for his research on brainwave frequencies. By 1931, he vanished from public record, yet, in those unearthed photographs, his name appears again, signed at the bottom of a lab ledger dated April 1932. Before we dive in, tell me, where are you listening from and what time is it there? Because depending on when you hear this, history may sound a little different. Brandt's early writings reveal a chilling obsession. He believed that the soul could be photographed, that with the right exposure and chemical development, the human essence could be captured as energy on film. He called it the after image of existence. His peers dismissed the idea as pseudoscience, but by 1933, those same peers had disappeared. The crate of forbidden photographs was likely part of his private archive, never intended for the public. The faces in those images show volunteers or victims whose identities were erased long before the war. But how did Brandt's experiments begin, and why did the government later try to erase every trace of his existence? To understand what truly happened, we must go back to 1929, the year the Obsidian Society quietly formed in Munich. Europe was obsessed with the unseen, from seances to early radio experiments, from X-ray photography to the mystical philosophies of Helena Blavatsky. The border between science and occultism had all but dissolved. The society positioned itself between both worlds, a private circle where physicists debated metaphysics and doctors performed rituals disguised as research. Dr. Brandt, then 37, was recruited by an aristocrat named Clara von Stein, a widow with deep ties to industrial and academic funding. Her estate hosted private gatherings attended by philosophers, diplomats, and even clergy. All shared one fascination: immortality through technology. At first, their experiments seemed harmless. They photographed terminally ill patients at the exact moment of death, trying to capture what Brandt called the soul's departure light. Hundreds of plates were developed, but soon their focus shifted. They began experimenting with living subjects, children from orphanages, political prisoners, the mentally ill. The photos from this phase are the ones no one was meant to see. They depict subjects mid-experiment, eyes wide, mouths sealed with tape or stitched shut. Notes scribbled on the back mention exposure times, heart rates, and cryptic phrases like V2 transfer incomplete and subject retains consciousness beyond capture. The strangest photo, according to the archivists, showed a man with no facial features, smooth skin, where eyes and mouth should have been. Yet the exposure number indicated that it was taken after the others, as if the process had erased more than life, it had removed identity. By 1932, Brandt's lab had moved to a secluded facility in the Black Forest, officially registered as a tuberculosis research center. Locals recalled hearing distant mechanical hums at night and seeing faint blue light rising from the trees. Villagers called it the Glass Hospital. When questioned decades later, one of the last surviving locals said, "Sometimes we saw people walk in but not out, and every time the lights glowed blue, the church bells rang without reason." Records suggest that the society's ultimate goal was to record consciousness using early photographic emulsions coated with silver nitrate and an unknown mineral compound. They believed this material, known only as obsidian dust, could capture electromagnetic residues of human thought. But in April 1933, something went wrong. Brandt's notes stop abruptly. The final entry reads, "Is greater than subject 12 achieved visible resonance. Light without source, no sound, eyes blackened beyond measure, process unstable, termination advised." After that, silence. Within weeks, the facility burned down. The official report cited chemical contamination, but local rumors claimed that the fire burned with no smoke, only light that pulsed like breathing. No bodies were ever recovered, and for decades, no one spoke of the glass hospital again. Character depth. Dr. Friedrich Brandt. To understand why Brandt pursued something so grotesque, we need to understand who he was. Born in Hamburg, 1892, he was the son of a Lutheran pastor. His early letters reveal guilt and obsession intertwined. He wrote, "Is greater than, if God made man in his image, then perhaps the image is where we find God." He lost his wife Liesel in childbirth, a tragedy that unmoored him completely. Colleagues recall that after her death, he began talking about photographic resurrection, claiming he could restore what had been lost through chemistry and light. His writings show a man torn between science and desperation. He spoke to students of capturing the divine spark, but confessed privately to colleagues that he feared he was only trapping shadows. When Clarenstein offered him unlimited funding, he accepted without hesitation. To him, the Obsidian Society wasn't evil, it was salvation. Yet, as his experiments crossed into forbidden territory, even his closest assistants began to leave. One, a young Polish photographer named Tomasz Kurek, vanished after allegedly trying to leak the research to the press. Weeks later, Kurek's camera was found near a railway line, lens shattered, and the last frame, later developed by investigators, showed an image too distorted to identify. Some claim it was a face. Others, an imprint of light that resembled a human figure mid-scream. Imagine walking into that ruined facility today. The scent of mildew and burnt film still clinging to the air. Shelves lined with shattered beakers. Walls stained with silver streaks where chemicals once dripped. On one wall, faint outlines of photographs still cling, their subjects long since faded. When historians examined the recovered negatives, they noticed something impossible. Even when placed under neutral lighting, the shadows in the photos moved. They shifted slightly, as if the captured energy still resisted containment. Experts dismissed this as chemical degradation, but one technician reportedly resigned after seeing his own reflection appear in one of the negatives, a reflection that blinked. It's here, amid those remnants, that the boundary between history and legend blurs. Were these experiments truly scientific, or were they ritualistic attempts to bridge the living and the dead under the guise of progress? Because in the 1930 seconds, power and superstition often shared the same language. The crate of photographs unearthed in 2007 had been hidden inside what was once a restricted Berlin archive. The archivist who found it said it was stored behind a false wall, sealed with layers of plaster, and stamped twice, once with the insignia of the Reich Ministry of Science, and again faintly with an unfamiliar symbol, a black circle bisected by a single vertical line. That mark would later be traced back to the Obsidian Society, the same group whose name appeared in coded documents tied to Dr. Friedrich Brandt. When the first batch of photos was digitized, researchers noticed something unsettling: metadata embedded in the negatives that didn't match 1930 seconds photography standards. Hidden chemical notations revealed that the photos were altered after their initial development, possibly decades later. Someone had gone back, modified, and then resealed them. For months, German historians worked to cross-reference the images with known archives. But it was a foreign intelligence historian, Dr. Maren Holt from Norway, who made the connection no one else could. Among the photographs, she found a recurring background element, a carved stone relief showing a hand holding a circle of glass. After tracing that image through pre-war architecture records, she located the site beneath the ruins of an old tuberculosis ward in the Black Forest. And that's where everything began to unravel. In 2010, an excavation team was granted limited access to what was left of the facility. Beneath the topsoil and rubble, they uncovered the sub-basement of what was once the Institute for Physikalische Heilkunde, a front operation for Brandt's laboratory. Inside, they found the remnants of photographic equipment fused to the floor by melted chemicals, glass negatives shattered like frost. But among the debris lay a metal trunk, perfectly preserved. Inside it, wrapped in decaying linen, were 6 film reels, a coded journal, and a set of glass slides labeled Project Epsilon. The journal was written in a mix of German, Latin, and ciphertext, but once decrypted, it revealed something chilling: a detailed record of consciousness extraction experiments performed between 1931 and 1933. The entries reference successful visual capture and sustained image resonance. In one passage, Brandt wrote, "is greater than, if light can record life, it must also record what is beyond life. The camera does not lie, but it does not forgive." Even more disturbing was a single photograph stored in a glass frame labeled Subject 12 After Process. The photo was unlike any others. Instead of a face, it showed a swirling light, a faint silhouette suspended in a beam, almost like a human form made of vapor. Researchers who handled the original print reported nausea, dizziness, and even hallucinations. Several described hearing faint whispers while scanning the image, though no sound recording existed. Laboratory technicians dismissed these claims as psychosomatic reactions to chemical fumes. But a pattern began to emerge. Each person who had direct contact with the photograph experienced vivid dreams involving light, water, and a faceless man watching from behind glass. At first, no one connected these symptoms to anything tangible. Then the journal provided the missing link. Authorities became involved after the discovery leaked to the press. Fearing a scandal tied to war-era experiments, Germany's Federal Archive temporarily seized the materials. However, several reels and photographs went missing during transfer. Official statements claimed the items were classified for preservation, but internal memos later exposed by investigative journalist Rolf Daniken revealed that 2 government officials had intervened. Both had family connections to high-ranking industrialists who, according to the journal, funded Brandt's experiments under the Obsidian Society. Daniken's reporting led to public outrage. Yet, as often happens with hidden truths, the backlash triggered suppression. His articles were retracted. His publisher went bankrupt weeks later, and Daniken himself vanished in 2011 during a research trip to the Black Forest. The last entry in his notebook read, "Is greater than the society never ended. They simply changed their name." Police investigations into Daniken's disappearance went nowhere. Search teams scoured the forest but found nothing except remnants of old wiring and concrete foundations buried beneath moss. The official explanation: accidental disappearance during fieldwork. Unofficially, several officers refused to continue the search after a series of unexplained equipment failures. Cameras malfunctioned, batteries drained in minutes. One drone operator quit after claiming his footage showed moving shadows beneath the trees, shadows that didn't match any visible objects. Every thread of inquiry seemed to dissolve into silence. The deeper investigators looked, the faster the evidence disappeared. Only one living witness from that era remained: Anna Keller, a nurse who was 19 years old when she briefly worked at the tuberculosis ward in 1932. When historians tracked her down in a retirement home near Stuttgart, she was 96, frail but lucid. Anna recalled arriving at the facility after responding to an ad promising generous pay for medical assistance. From her testimony, "Is greater than we were told to care for patients undergoing light therapy." But those weren't patients. They were people who never spoke. They sat in chairs covered in wires and glass helmets. I saw one of them lift his head and look at me. His eyes were black, not dark, black, like burned film. She said the doctors work mostly at night, locking the lower levels. One evening she heard a scream from below, metallic, almost mechanical. The next morning, every nurse except her was reassigned or dismissed. 2 days later, the building caught fire. When shown one of the recovered photographs decades later, she whispered, "That's him." The evidence trail in 2015 ended in a way no historian expected. A locked facility in the Swiss Alps owned by the Halion Group, guarded by layers of corporate security and digital surveillance. Dr. Maren Holt and a small trusted team gained limited access through archival permissions, granted under the pretense of academic research into early photographic technology. Yet from the moment they stepped inside, the air seemed thick with the weight of decades, as though the building itself remembered what had transpired within its walls. The main archive room was vast, almost cathedral-like, with steel shelving stretching to the ceiling. Dust hung in the air, illuminated by narrow beams of light from high windows. On a single shelf, 3 metal crates similar to the one discovered in Berlin had been carefully preserved. Inside, Maren found more photographic negatives, journals, and astonishingly, a leather-bound ledger signed Friedrich Brandt, 1933-1937. Unlike the previous findings, these documents were written in clear, meticulous handwriting, detailing continued experiments, this time under the cover of post-war reconstruction. Brandt had survived, or at least continued his work through intermediaries. The ledger described advanced photonic experiments, chemical compounds designed to prolong consciousness in captured energy forms, and early theoretical applications that eerily prefigured neural interface technology. Through careful analysis, it became clear what Brandt had intended all along. He had not merely been photographing the living or attempting a scientific feat for fame. His goal was the preservation of consciousness as light. In the 1,930 seconds, this involved human subjects restrained and exposed to his experimental apparatus. By the 1,940 seconds, it had shifted to stored human energy electromagnetic imprints derived from brainwaves embedded in silver nitrate emulsions coated with the mysterious obsidian dust. Subject 12, as we now know, was not only the assistant Thomas Kurik, but also the first human to survive the process beyond death. The images we see in the photographs, his eyes erased, his features blurred, were the imprint of consciousness itself. Brandt's notes describe it chillingly. "Is greater than The essence persists when matter ceases. The soul captured in silver, visible yet untouchable. One may observe but cannot intervene. Subject 12 observes in turn. The experiments were halted physically by the 1933 fire, but Brandt's techniques survived, refined by the post-war Hellion Group. It was this survival that explained the continuity of photographic resonance phenomena into the modern era. The most disturbing revelation came from the final negatives Marin's team developed in Switzerland. One roll contained a series of images labeled simply E1 E12, showing the progression of Brandt's post-war experiments. E1 showed a single man seated in a chair, head encased in a glass dome, wires coiling around his skull. By E6, faint wisps of light emanated from the dome, forming an almost humanoid shape in the empty space around him. By E12, the man's body appeared empty, but the light shape persisted suspended, flickering, as though conscious. Marin noted that when these images were digitized, subtle movement could be detected, shadows shifting, wisps extending slightly between frames. Independent testing confirmed the phenomenon was not an artifact of scanning. The original negatives themselves contained an electromagnetic signature measurable with modern sensors. In other words, Brandt had succeeded. He had trapped consciousness in film. Why did Brandt pursue such a path? The ledger provides an intimate psychological portrait. He was a man consumed by grief and obsession, a scholar who lost his family and sought to cheat death itself. Yet his writings reveal a duality. He considered himself a savior. Yet each experiment crossed moral boundaries so extreme that even the Obsidian Society had internal conflict. Clara von Stein, the aristocratic patron, had funded his work out of ambition and curiosity, but she expressed in private correspondence fear and doubt. One letter reads, "Is greater than Friedrich. What you create is not life. You hold shadows in your hand. If the world sees this, there will be a reckoning." It is likely that these moral concerns were part of the reason the experiments were hidden. Brandt's work could not be acknowledged publicly without terrifying consequences. Entire governments later became complicit in its suppression, first through wartime secrecy, later via corporate control in the post-war period. When news of Marinholtz's discovery broke in academic circles, the response was mixed. Mainstream outlets hesitated to publish, concerned about verification. Small investigative journals attempted coverage, but much of the evidence remained classified. Yet the few leaked images triggered public fascination and horror. Debates raged on forums and discussion boards. Could human consciousness truly be captured on film? Were we looking at science or at a form of posthumous imprisonment? Social media amplified fear, creating a minor phenomenon dubbed Brandt's ghosts. Descendants of the people involved, including the families of Brandt, Kurek, and von Stein, reacted with a mix of denial, shame, and fear. Some refused to comment. Others quietly assisted researchers, fearing what might happen if the truth were ignored. At a broader societal level, historians began to question the foundations of post-war science. Could early breakthroughs in neuroimaging and photonic research have been influenced by illicit experimentation? Did the technology that emerged in the late 20th century have origins in these secretive, ethically abhorrent studies? The implications are unsettling. Science may have progressed on foundations that were never meant to be seen, built upon experiments that trapped human essence in cold chemical light. The final ledger entries, dated 1937, describe Brandt's last act. Realizing the dangers of his work, he attempted to release Subject 12 from the photographic matrix, but his notes indicate failure. Subject 12's consciousness was entirely preserved within the negatives and glass slides. Even more terrifying, Brandt theorized that the captured subjects could influence reality, their awareness stretching beyond the confines of the film. Some images, when viewed under precise lighting, appeared to shift in subtle, almost sentient ways, heads turning, eyes narrowing, subtle gestures suggesting the observer was now being observed. Marinholt reflecting on the full collection, wrote, "Is greater than the 1,930 seconds photos were never just images. They were prisons, and the prisoners may still be aware. The world has forgotten them, but they have not forgotten us." It is here that the story closes, yet leaves an unsettling possibility. The photographs are more than historical artifacts. They are echoes of consciousness, evidence that forbidden knowledge survived, hidden for nearly a century, waiting for someone to look too closely. History's silence is not empty. It hums with the memory of those who were erased, and those erased may still watch. If you are intrigued by the shadows of history, the secret science tried to bury, and the images that should never be seen, consider this your invitation to explore further. Share this story, discuss it with others, and remember, some truths are hidden for a reason, but uncovering them may reveal more than you expect. If you found this journey into forbidden history compelling, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share so others can step into the shadows alongside us.